Hi, sorry, I was muted for a second there. My name is Emily, and I am the host of Inner Work for Greater Good. So nice to have you here. Sorry, I had some technical issues there. But the whole point of Inner Work for Greater Good is to teach you inner work that accelerates your power, accelerates and expands your power to really make a difference, to shine your brightest light, and to be the best you that you can possibly be so that you can have the biggest impact that you possibly desire to have. So today's subject is, why don't you trust yourself? And then the actual second question of that is, why should you trust yourself? So trusting yourself is something that I run into, lack of trust in oneself is something I run into a lot with my clients. And it's so interesting because usually in the beginning of my sessions with my clients, when I'm about to take them through the drawing out process, or maybe I'm already taking them through the drawing out process, and basically what sometimes I find myself, listening to them, and then I think they're not trusting themselves. That's just a bit, like, it's that basic. And I'll say to them, like, it sounds like you're just not trusting yourself. And in other words, that comes up because I can hear that that their truth is really speaking, and that they actually know, let's say, what's right for them in that situation or in that moment, but they're not trusting the voice of truth, or they're not even recognizing that truth as their truth. They're not recognizing that that's actually their clarity speaking. That's actually the wisdom trying to get heard, but either they're not listening to it, or they're really not trusting it and trusting that that's the appropriate choice for themselves, or even that they should even trust themselves. And so really this is a question of, why don't we trust ourselves? This is just such a common problem. And it's actually a pretty simple answer, although it can be expanded a lot. And that usually is because of choices we've made or experiences that we've had that have caused us to fear, that have caused us to doubt and question. And what ends up happening, so let me just say, actually, with childhood, for example, maybe you did something that you felt really proud of and you felt really good about, but rather than getting praised by your parents, you got criticized. What if you did something that you thought was right, and you really were like, yeah, I know I'm doing the right thing, but then there was not such a great result from that, or at least as you could see, that you had good intentions, but the results were not so great. There are all kinds of situations in our lives, in childhood and into adulthood, that can cause us to think, well, maybe I shouldn't trust myself. I was wrong. Or maybe I can't trust, not just in myself, but also in the people around me, in the world around me. So it's the experiences that end up creating that fear inside of us, that can cause us then not to trust. And what happens is, and I talk about this all the time, is that parts inside of us form inside of us in reaction to those experiences. And those parts are the parts of us that carry those fears, whether they're afraid for themselves or they're afraid for us, or sometimes both. And so what happens is, because of those experiences, it's like a part of us sort of gets encoded with that fear. And I call these parts X powers. I talk about this a lot in my work. This is something I've discovered. There are 3 types of X powers, etc. You can watch the videos about those. But the point is that those parts of us get encoded with that fear. And so because then there's fear, now think about, what's the opposite of fear? It's trust. I know we say it's love, but I actually think it's more trust. So if we fear something, we definitely don't trust it. If we trust something, we definitely don't fear it. Or we could just trust that it's going to do what it's going to do, but it means you kind of go, all right, that's just the way it is, and you can trust that that's what that thing is going to do or person's going to do. But the point is that one of the opposites of fear is trust, and the opposite of trust is fear. And so what happens is, parts of us form in our lives that carry that fear. And then they'll pop up whenever it comes time to actually make a decision, or take a certain action, or want to trust a person in our lives. Maybe there's a relationship, there's a possible relationship that could be forming. And yet we're like, I don't know if I can trust that person. I don't know if I can trust myself in the relationship. I don't know that I can trust that I'll make the right decisions. I don't know if I can trust my intuition, etc. All these questions that we have. And so what happens, and that is because of these parts of us that carry those fears. And what they can do is they can cause us to question ourselves. They can cause us to fear outcomes. They can cause us not to trust in our own ability to achieve certain things or do certain things. They can undermine our sense of faith and trust in ourselves, in the world, in others. And they can also prevent us. They can actually be stopping us, physically stopping us from doing that thing, because they're afraid of what would happen if we were to do that thing. Both a fear of positive and fear of negative. I mean, there are parts of us that are just as afraid of darkness as they are of our light, because maybe we've been criticized in those moments when we've been shining our lights. And so it's important to be aware that actually that not trusting yourself is not saying that you're wrong or you're stupid or you don't know the answer or whatever. It can easily be because you have parts of you that have taught you not to trust yourself. I remember that when I was years ago, I had a part of myself that I drew out. I was doing the drawing out process on myself. And as I was trying to make, I think I was trying to make a decision on something, but I noticed this like voice of like, I don't know, that would just sort of, and it wasn't like, no, you're stupid. No, you can't. It wasn't like criticizing me. It just kept going, I don't know about that. And even in that voice. So I drew it out. I forgot what it looks like, but I even wrote down what it said and even the sound that it kind of made. And I thought, where is that coming from? And it was coming from someone in my life from my childhood who that's the sound that this person would make anytime I was about to make a decision or I was trying to, go forward on something. And this person wanted me to step back and just think. It wasn't ill-intended. But what it ended up doing inside of me is creating this part that was like, mimicking its, this person's voice and going, I don't know. And what happened was, rather than just being that voice that kind of helped me to go, well, maybe I need to step back and just consider everything. Let's say, maybe I just need to process this a little bit longer before I jump into this whatever the thing was. Maybe I need to go, well, hold on. But what it did was it actually created fear inside of me and a lack of trust in myself, because it felt like this person wasn't trusting in my ability to make that decision for myself, probably because I was a child, but also that it made me feel like I just couldn't trust myself at all. And so this part was like, and undermining my faith in myself. So that's one example of a part of us that can form that, may come from even a perfectly well-intentioned person, and yet it still has that impact of causing us not to trust ourselves. And so what I did was I drew that part out and healed it and released it, or it healed so that it could like let go and stop doing that job that it thought it should have been doing. And I stopped having that voice inside of me, and it made it a hell of a lot easier to actually trust myself and really trust that I could, that what I was feeling was correct for me in terms of what I needed to do, and that it was okay to do what felt right for me. That I could consider all the options, or I could consider all the thoughts and the feelings and everything, but at the same time that I really just needed to trust me. So the point is that if you're noticing that you don't trust yourself, if you're noticing that you're constantly in this, I don't know, should I do this? Should I do that? Maybe there's an anxiety about it. Maybe it's this flip-flopping. Maybe it's, not trusting yourself in relationships because you've made mistakes before, or because you thought, oh yes, this person's the one. And then it turns out that they were not your forever person. And so then you start to really not trust your own taste, your own perspective, your own perception of people. Or maybe you really were in a situation where somebody like seemed really great, and then they absolutely violated your boundaries, and they turned out not to be who they present themselves as. I mean, that is a kind of trauma that can really cause us to be like, I don't know who to trust. And I can't trust in my sense of other people, for example. So the point is, there are all kinds of experiences that cause us not to trust ourselves. But really what they're doing, and this is the key thing that I want to get across here, is that what those parts are doing is all they're doing is obscuring the inner truth, that inner knowing, that inner trust that is always there, that we already have inside of us. Okay. So it's not that ability to trust yourself, or that inner knowing and that intuition and that, faith, inner faith in yourself or in life or the world. That's already there. It's not like you have to go get that somewhere. That's already there. And these parts, all they're doing is obscuring your ability or preventing you from really tuning into that and trusting that. They're sort of blocking it. It's kind of like you might have this, really bright light, and someone's throwing blankets on it or putting filters in front of it or creating static. But that light is still always there. And so then the second question, of course, is why should you trust yourself? First of all, because not trusting yourself a lot of times is just a big fat waste of time and energy. Think about how much time you have spent like ruminating and questioning, and really like your brain's like, I don't know, all this kind of stuff, and how long it takes and how much energy it takes. Emotions take up a lot of our energy. Just notice, like, think of a time when it was like, oh my God, I belabored that point, or belabored that decision, or I, beat that horse to death. I just didn't trust myself, and I wasted so much time and energy trying to figure things out or trying to control things maybe that I just couldn't control. So for one thing, it actually helps. It saves you so much time and energy when you actually do tune in to your truth and to that knowing and trust it. Now, you may make mistakes, and that's okay. All right. Or in the moment, you may make what you think is a mistake, but it actually may result in something fabulous. So you never know. But you never know unless you trust, and unless you at least give yourself that chance to trust yourself or trust the other person. Let's say if you genuinely feel like maybe it's just your own fear and not necessarily your intuition. There's all kinds of things that can come when we actually trust ourselves. And it makes life a lot easier. Actually, that's kind of part of it. You stop wasting so much time and energy. Life becomes so much easier when we trust ourselves. It is so much easier and so much less wasted time and energy. Because when you trust your truth, you make better decisions, you feel more empowered, and you light up. When you actually can allow yourself to notice that voice of truth, that wisdom inside of you. And even though you may have other parts of you that are like, you can draw those out, do my course, free course, drawing out process, take the free course. But you can, the more you allow yourself to go, well, wait a minute, there is this calm knowing that I have inside. Even though I've got all these thoughts and fears and feelings and all this other stuff, it's like, but wait a minute, there is that calm knowing inside. I don't know where it's coming from, but it still feels right. I'm going to trust that. That is when we trust it. That's actually when we make better decisions, clearer, calmer decisions, and we feel so much more empowered because we're making that decision not from fear, but from faith, not from fear, but from trust and from our inner knowing and that truth. So think of a situation in your life where you are not trusting yourself, whether it's to make the right decision or to go in a certain direction or to whatever it is. Just notice, maybe it's probably more than one area in your life where you're not trusting yourself. And imagine, who would I be if I were to trust myself? What would I do if I were to trust myself? If I trusted myself, what would I do? If I trusted my truth, what decision would I make? Which path would I take? How would I feel? So just play with that and notice the contrast between when you make decisions from fear and lack of trust in yourself versus when you make decisions and see things through the lens of, I trust myself and everything's going to be okay and I'm going to be okay. All right. Let me know how it goes. As always, Emily, my email is emily@changelight.world. Please do come to changelight.world and get on, take the course, get into our community. It's free. I would love to have you there. And yes, until then, I'll see you next week and I hope you stay well. Big hugs.